March 4, 1944, 423 B-17 flying fortresses return from Berlin, the deepest American daylight penetration into the Reich, over 1,000 miles round trip. Command expects them back after dark. Fuel reserve calculations leave no margin, but the first bombers touch down at 15:30 hours, 4 hours early. General Henry Hap Arnold, commanding the entire United States Army Air Forces, stares at the operations board in disbelief. His words ripple through the room. Thank God they're already home. January 1944, 8th Air Force Headquarters, High Wycombe, England, 30 miles west of London, hidden beneath bare oak trees and winter fog. The air war over Europe is bleeding out. Strategic bombing doctrine promised precision destruction of German industry. Unescorted daylight raids deep into Nazi territory. The reality is attrition. Schweinfurt, Regensburg, missions that cost 50, 60 bombers in a single day. Crews that never come back. Range is the problem. P-47 Thunderbolts can escort the heavy bombers to the German border. Maybe, on a good day with perfect weather and drop tanks that don't malfunction, then they turn back. Fuel gone. The bombers continue alone, flak corridors, massed fighter attacks. Luftwaffe controllers track every formation from takeoff to target. They wait until the escorts peel off. Then they strike. Berlin sits 350 miles from the English coast, 600 miles from the American bases in East Anglia, over 1,000 miles round trip when accounting for routing, weather deviation, and combat maneuvering. Every planner in 8th Air Force knows the number. It haunts briefing rooms and mess halls. No escort fighter in the Allied inventory can reach Berlin and return. The bombers must go alone or not at all. General James Doolittle assumes command of 8th Air Force in January. He inherits a force stretched thin, morale fraying, losses mounting faster than replacements arrive. The pressure from Washington is relentless. Destroy German war production, break the Luftwaffe, support the coming invasion of France, do it before summer. But first, survive. The mission planners gather around tables covered in maps and fuel consumption charts. They measure distances in gallons. Every mile costs pounds of aviation gasoline. Every combat turn burns minutes of endurance. The P-47 Thunderbolt, despite its name, cannot stretch its legs far enough. The twin-engine P-38 Lightning has the range, but suffers mechanical failures in the cold, damp air over northern Europe. Engine seize. Turbochargers fail. Pilots abort before crossing the enemy coast. Then comes word of a new fighter. North American P-51 Mustang, originally designed for the British, powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Long, lean, efficient. Early reports from the 9th Air Force operating Mustangs in ground attack roles note something unusual. The aircraft sips fuel. It flies farther on less. Engineers calculate theoretical range with drop tanks. The numbers look impossible. Fighter Command scrutinizes the figures. They run the math again. Berlin and back, marginally possible if everything goes perfectly, if pilots fly precise cruise settings, if they don't get into extended dogfights, if weather cooperates, if drop tanks feed properly. Too many ifs. But it's the only option. 8th Fighter Command begins receiving PB Mustangs in December 1943. Conversion training is rushed. Pilots familiar with the brutish P-47 now climb into a fighter that handles like a sports car. Lighter, faster, less forgiving. The learning curve is steep. Some pilots love it immediately. Others miss the rugged dependability of the Thunderbolt. By late February, enough Mustang groups are operational to attempt what doctrine says cannot be done. Escort heavy bombers all the way to Berlin. Stay with them through the flak and the fighters. Bring them home. The mission is scheduled for early March. Weather permitting, target selection is still being finalized. The bomber crews hear rumors. Berlin. The name alone carries weight, the capital of the Third Reich. Adolf Hitler's seat of power, heavily defended, ringed with flak batteries, swarming with fighters. No American bomber has struck Berlin in daylight. The British tried night raids. They paid in blood. If 8th Air Force can hit Berlin in broad daylight and return, it will shatter German confidence. Prove that no target is beyond reach. Show that the Luftwaffe cannot protect even its own capital. But only if the crews come back. Fuel is the silent enemy, more dangerous than flak, more unforgiving than fighters. An engine that runs dry doesn't negotiate. It stops. The aircraft becomes a glider. Over occupied Europe, a glider is a coffin. Doolittle insists on one thing. The fighters must go all the way. No halfway measures, no turning back at the border. The bomber crews need to see friendly fighters over the target. They need to know they're not alone. He orders the mission prepared. The weather must break, the forecast must hold, the aircraft must be ready, the crews must be rested. Everything depends on a single variable no one can control: distance. If you want more such stories, like and subscribe so these lives aren't forgotten. Lieutenant Colonel James Howard commands the 354th Fighter Group, the Pioneer Mustang Group, first unit in 8th Air Force to fly the P-51 operationally. Based at Boxted, a flat, windswept airfield in Essex. Mud and Marston matting. Nissen huts that sweat condensation. Flight line maintenance conducted in freezing drizzle. Howard is 30 years old. Lean, quiet, methodical, he flew with the Flying Tigers in China before Pearl Harbor, down 6 Japanese aircraft, learned to fly and fight in a theater where fuel, parts, and support were luxuries. He knows how to stretch an engine's endurance, how to read weather, how to bring an aircraft home on fumes. His pilots respect him because he doesn't waste words or fuel. The 354th receives its first Mustangs in November 1943. Howard oversees the transition personally. He studies the aircraft like a mechanic, not just a pilot. Fuel system, engine management, cruise settings. He flies test hops at different altitudes, recording fuel consumption, manifold pressure, RPM settings. He builds tables, shares them with his squadron commanders. Other fighter groups rely on instinct and aggression. Howard relies on numbers. His pilots notice his habits. He never takes off with unnecessary weight. He briefs fuel discipline before every mission. He times rendezvous points to the minute. When other groups chase German fighters across the sky, burning fuel in extended pursuits, Howard's pilots stay with the bombers. They fight only when necessary, then they return. This approach earns quiet admiration from bomber crews. They request the 354th by name. Howard doesn't fly a desk. He rotates himself into the mission roster, leads from the cockpit. His ground crew knows his preferences. Mustang rigged for maximum range. Drop tanks checked twice. Guns bore-sighted personally. He walks the pre-flight himself, even when the crew chief insists it's done. In early March, the 354th receives orders for a maximum range mission. No target specified yet, just fuel planning. Howard gathers his pilots in the briefing hut. Bare bulbs hanging from wooden rafters. Maps covered with cloth. Stove in the corner struggling against the cold. He walks them through cruise settings again. Altitude, airspeed, mixture, propeller pitch, every variable affects range. He shows them the math, Berlin distance, fuel capacity with 2 108-gallon drop tanks, margin for error. There is no margin. One pilot asks what happens if they hit headwinds over Germany. Howard's answer is simple. They'll know when they're halfway. If the fuel doesn't add up, they turn back. No one tries to be a hero. Dead heroes don't escort bombers home. Another pilot asks about combat. What if they engage German fighters over the target? Howard pauses, the room waits. He tells them to fight smart. Short bursts, no wild chases, stay with the bombers. If a German breaks off, let him go. The mission is the bombers, not the scorecard. Some pilots shift in their seats. Fighter pilots are trained to attack, to hunt, to win. Howard is asking them to show restraint at 500 miles per hour under fire. It goes against instinct. But they trust him. The 354th isn't the only fighter group preparing for the mission. The 4th Fighter Group at Debden, the 357th at Leston, the 363rd at Rivenhall, all flying Mustangs now, all running the same fuel calculations, all facing the same reality. If the weather breaks, they're going to Berlin. Howard spends the evening before the mission walking the flight line. His crew chief, a sergeant from Ohio, asks if he's worried. Howard says no, he's already done the math, the aircraft can make it. The question is whether the men can. The sergeant doesn't understand. Howard explains, flying a fighter for 5 hours straight is exhausting. No autopilot, constant vigilance, scanning for enemies, watching fuel, monitoring engine temperatures, navigating, staying in formation, then fighting, then navigating home, all while sitting in a cramped cockpit, breathing oxygen, feeling every vibration. Fatigue kills as surely as bullets. The sergeant asks what Howard does to stay sharp. Howard says he talks to himself. Out loud, in the cockpit. Calls out altitude, heading, fuel, keeps his mind engaged, doesn't let it drift. He learned it in China, flying alone over mountains with no navigation aids. Talking keeps you present. The crew chief says he'll make sure the radio is working. Howard smiles, rare for him. He thanks the sergeant and walks back to his quarters. Inside, he reviews the mission profile one more time. Take off before dawn, climb to altitude, rendezvous with the bomber stream over the North Sea, escort them across the Dutch coast, through German airspace, over Berlin, back out, across the flak belts, over the water, home. 1,000 miles. 5 hours. No second chances. He sets his alarm and tries to sleep. Outside, the wind rattles the Nissen hut. Rain taps on metal. England in March. Cold, wet, hostile, but tomorrow the weather is supposed to clear. Tomorrow they'll find out if the Mustang can do what the textbooks say it can't. The North American P-51 Mustang was never supposed to be a long-range escort fighter. It was designed in 1940 for the British, who needed fighters fast and couldn't wait for Spitfire production to catch up. North American Aviation had never built a fighter before. They promised a prototype in 120 days. They delivered in 117. The original Mustang, powered by an Allison engine, was fast at low altitude but anemic above 15,000 feet. Supercharger limitations. It worked well for ground attack and reconnaissance but couldn't compete with German fighters at bomber altitudes. Then Rolls-Royce installed a Merlin engine. The transformation was immediate. The Merlin's two-stage supercharger gave the Mustang performance at altitude that rivaled or exceeded anything in the sky. Speed, climb rate, maneuverability, but the real revelation was range. The Mustang's laminar flow wing was designed for efficiency. Low drag, high lift. The fuselage, sleek and uncluttered, slipped through the air with minimal resistance. The engine, efficient and reliable, burned less fuel per mile than the radial-powered Thunderbolt. Internal fuel capacity, 269 gallons in the fuselage tanks, including the controversial 85-gallon tank behind the pilot. Add 2 108-gallon drop tanks under the wings. Total, 485 gallons. Engineers calculated maximum range at optimal cruise settings. Altitude 25,000 feet. Airspeed around 300 miles per hour. Mixture lean. Propeller pitch course. Under perfect conditions, the Mustang could fly over 2,000 miles. But perfect conditions don't exist in combat. Every deviation costs fuel. Climb to altitude burns gallons. Combat maneuvering burns more. Headwinds stretch the distance. Cold temperatures affect engine efficiency. Drop tanks sometimes fail to feed. Transfer pumps malfunction. Fuel gauges lie. And there's the 85-gallon fuselage tank behind the pilot. It shifts the center of gravity aft, makes the aircraft unstable, difficult to control in combat. Pilots are briefed to burn that tank first before crossing enemy territory. Once it's empty, the Mustang handles normally. But until then, the aircraft feels wrong, mushy, unresponsive. Fighter pilots, accustomed to nimble aircraft, hate it. Some try to jettison the fuel before combat, waste gallons to regain control. Flight leaders forbid it. The fuel is the mission. Without it, they turn back. The 8th Air Force Fighter Command runs test flights in February. Experienced pilots fly Mustangs at different altitudes and speeds, measuring actual fuel consumption against theoretical figures. The results are close. Not perfect, but close enough. Berlin range is calculated at the edge of feasibility. If pilots maintain cruise discipline, monitor engine settings, and avoid prolonged combat, they can make it. Barely. Weather is another variable. Headwinds over Germany can add 30 minutes to the flight. Tailwinds on the return can save it. Forecasting is imprecise. Bomber crews joke grimly that mission planners consult tea leaves as much as meteorologists. The mission to Berlin is scheduled, postponed, rescheduled. Weather scrubs it twice. Doolittle refuses to send the bombers without fighter cover all the way. He's seen the casualty lists from unescorted missions. He won't repeat Schweinfurt. Finally, on March 3, the forecast shows a break. High pressure moving in. Clear skies expected over Germany on March 4. Winds aloft favorable. The mission is on. Target Berlin, industrial and government districts, bombing through cloud cover if necessary using H2X radar. Primary goal, demonstrate capability. Secondary goal, destroy infrastructure. Tertiary goal, force the Luftwaffe into battle. Over 900 heavy bombers assigned. Biggest raid yet. B-17s and B-24s from across 8th Air Force. 17 bomb groups. Pathfinder aircraft equipped with radar. Fighter escort all the way. 16 fighter groups assigned. P-51 Mustangs, P-47 Thunderbolts with extended-range tanks, and a few remaining P-38 Lightnings. The Mustangs will penetrate deepest. The Thunderbolts will cover the first and last legs. The Lightnings will fill gaps. Every fighter pilot receives the same briefing. Stay with the bombers. Ignore decoys. Conserve fuel. Do not chase enemy aircraft away from the formation. If you get separated, navigate home independently. Do not expect rescue over enemy territory. Howard briefs his group at 300 hours on March 4. The target is revealed. Berlin, some pilots exhale slowly, others nod. Everyone expected it. He walks them through the route. Take off at 600, climb to 25,000 feet, rendezvous over the WWII. Escort the second bomber wing, penetrate to Berlin, stay over the target, escort back to the coast. Land around 1500 hours. 9 hours from engines start to shut down. 5.5 hours airborne. The longest fighter mission in the history of the United States Army Air Forces. Howard reminds them about fuel one last time. He's run the numbers personally. They'll land with 30 minutes reserve, less if they fight. He tells them to check their gauges every 10 minutes, write it down, keep track. If the math doesn't work at the halfway point, they turn back. One pilot asks if anyone has ever flown a Mustang for 5.5 hours straight. Howard says they're about to. The decision to launch comes at 500 hours. Weather reconnaissance aircraft return from Germany. Cloud cover over Berlin but broken. Visibility adequate for radar bombing. Winds aloft within acceptable limits. Forecast holds. Doolittle gives the order. The mission is a go. Across East Anglia, engines cough to life in the darkness. Bomber bases at Thorpe Abbotts, Bassingbourn, Kimballton, Grafton, Underwood. Crews stumble from trucks in the cold. Flight gear heavy with fleece and leather. Oxygen masks clipped to belts. Maps folded in knee pockets. Fighter pilots suit up in silence. Parachute harnesses, vests, gloves, helmets. Some carry sandwiches. Others, flasks of coffee. A few, nothing. No point eating before a 5-hour flight in a cramped cockpit with no bathroom. Howard walks to his Mustang in the dark. His crew chief salutes. Aircraft ready, fuel topped off, tanks checked, guns loaded. 4.50 caliber machine guns, 2 in each wing. 1,500 rounds total, enough for 15 seconds of continuous fire. Howard climbs onto the wing, settles into the cockpit. The seat fits like an old chair, worn in, familiar. He connects his oxygen hose, radio lead harness straps, adjusts the seat, checks the controls, stick, rudder, trim tabs, everything moves smoothly. He primes the engine, fuel pump on, mixture rich, throttle cracked, magnetos hot. The crew chief signals ready. Howard hits the starter. The Merlin growls, coughs, catches. 12 cylinders fire in sequence. The propeller blurs. The engine settles into a deep mechanical purr. He checks oil pressure, coolant temperature, fuel flow, all normal. Around him, other Mustangs come alive. Exhausts glow orange in the pre-dawn darkness. The sound builds, rolls across the airfield. 50 fighters, 50 Merlins, a symphony of controlled violence. Howard waves away the wheel chocks, taxis to the runway. His wingman falls in behind. Then the second element, the third. The entire squadron lines up in pairs. Tower clears them for takeoff. Howard advances the throttle. 61 inches of manifold pressure. The Mustang accelerates, tail comes up. Airspeed climbs, 80 knots, 90, 100. The stick lightens. He eases back. The wheels leave the ground. He's airborne. Gear up, flaps up. Climb power set. He banks gently, letting his wingman close up. The rest of the squadron follows. They form up in the dark, navigation lights glowing faintly. Assembly takes 15 minutes. Then they head east. The bombers are already airborne, launched earlier, climbing slowly under the weight of fuel and bombs. Each B carries 6,000 pounds of ordnance. Incendiaries, high explosives, fragmentation clusters, enough to flatten city blocks. The bomber stream stretches for miles. Stacked altitudes, staggered formations. A river of aluminum and steel moving toward Germany. The fighters climb to meet them. Howard reaches 25,000 feet over the North Sea. The sun rises behind him. First light spills across the horizon. The water below turns from black to gray to blue. England disappears behind. Ahead, the Dutch coast materializes. Pale sandbanks, mudflats, the Zuiderzee. The bomber formations appear as dark clusters against the bright sky. Hundreds of them, contrails streaming behind. The fighters move into position, one group ahead, one above, one on each flank, layers of protection. Howard scans the sky, clear, no enemy aircraft yet. The Luftwaffe knows they're coming. Radar stations track them from takeoff. Controllers are vectoring interceptors, but not yet. The stream crosses the coast. Flak begins immediately. Black puffs bloom below, too low. The gunners haven't adjusted for altitude yet. The formations press on. German fighters appear at 900 hours. Focke-Wulf 190s, Messerschmitt 109s, they orbit at a distance. Watching, counting, calculating. They don't attack. Not yet. They're waiting for the escorts to turn back, waiting for the fuel to run out, waiting for the bombers to be alone. But the Mustangs don't turn back. They stay. Mile after mile, deeper into Germany, past Hanover, past Magdeburg, the distance grows, the fuel drains. Howard checks his gauges. Fuel consumption matches predictions. He's on profile. His wingman reports the same. The bomber crews see the Mustangs beside them. Above them, weaving through the formations, they don't believe it at first. Fighters this deep, impossible. But there they are, little friends, silver and olive drab, sleek and fast. The radio chatter reflects the disbelief. Bomber pilots calling out fighter positions, gratitude in their voices, surprise, relief. The German controllers hear it too. They realize the escorts aren't turning back. The attacks begin. Focke-Wulfs dive from above. Head-on passes at the bombers. Cannon fire, tracers, the Mustangs break toward them. Deflection shots, the Germans scatter, regroup, attack again. Howard fires at a 190 pulling up through a bomber formation. Short burst. The German rolls away trailing smoke. Howard doesn't chase. He pulls back into position, scans for the next threat. Fuel drains faster in combat, maneuvering burns gallons. He checks his gauge, still acceptable, barely. The bomber stream approaches Berlin. Flak intensifies. The sky turns black with bursts. The formations fly through it. No evasion, straight and level. Bomb run discipline. Aircraft shudder from near misses. Some trail smoke. One B-17 drops out of formation. 2 engines dead. Fighters swarm it. Howard's squadron stays with the main formation. Their job is the bombers still flying, not the ones already lost. The bombs fall at 10:30 hours. Clouds obscure the target. Radar-aimed drops. The bombardiers toggle based on Pathfinder signals. The bomb bays empty. The formations bank away, turn west, head home. The Luftwaffe attacks in force now. Desperate. Their capital is burning. They throw everything at the bombers. Twin-engine destroyers, rocket-equipped 109s, standard fighters in mass formations. The Mustangs meet them head-on. Dogfights erupt across 50 miles of sky. Twisting, turning, diving, altitude traded for speed, speed traded for position. The combat is brutal and efficient, no room for error, no second chances. Howard shoots down a 109 attempting a rocket pass. Flames erupt from the engine. The German pilot bails out. Howard reverses, climbs, scans, another 190 closing on a straggling bomber. He dives, cuts the angle, fires. The 190 breaks away, smoking. He checks his fuel, lower than planned. Combat cost him, he calculates quickly, enough to reach the coast, maybe. He keys the radio, orders his squadron to disengage unless directly threatened. Stay with the bombers, heading home. The formations clear Berlin airspace. The attacks lessen. German fighters break off, fuel exhaustion on both sides. The long flight back begins. The return leg is a test of endurance and arithmetic. Every pilot calculates constantly. Fuel remaining, distance to coast, airspeed, wind correction, altitude, engine settings. Howard throttles back to maximum economy. Mixture lean, propeller pitch course, manifold pressure as low as he dares without losing formation position. The Merlin purrs quietly, almost gentle, sipping fuel. The bomber stream spreads out. Damaged aircraft fall behind. Some drop to lower altitudes, struggling on failing engines. Fighters stay with them when they can, shepherding the wounded home. Howard's fuel gauge shows less than a quarter tank. He's burned the fuselage tank, both drop tanks and most of the wing tanks. What remains is measured in minutes, not miles. He runs the numbers again, coast in 30 minutes, base in 45, fuel for 50, tight. His wingman reports lower fuel. Combat maneuvering cost him more. Howard tells him to throttle back further, fall slightly behind if necessary, glide more, power less. His wingman acknowledges. The Mustang drifts back a few yards, nose slightly down, trading altitude for distance. Around them, other fighters face the same calculus. Some peel off early, unable to make England. They head for emergency fields in Holland or Belgium. Liberated territory, barely. Others ditch in the North Sea, hoping for air-sea rescue. Some just disappear. Fuel exhaustion over enemy territory leaves no trace. The bomber crews watch the fighters thin out. The little friends who stayed with them all the way to Berlin are leaving, not by choice, by physics. At 1300 hours, the stream crosses the German border heading west. Flak diminishes. Enemy fighters are gone. The sky feels empty, just the steady drone of engines and the slow burn of fuel. Howard's altimeter shows 24,000 feet. He hasn't descended. Higher altitude gives better fuel economy and more glide range if the engine quits. But it also means longer descent into landing, which costs fuel. He decides to stay high as long as possible. The Dutch coast appears at 1330 hours. Pale beaches, the North Sea beyond, gray water stretching to the horizon. England lies 90 miles across that water, 10 minutes of flying, an eternity on fumes. The bomber formations descend gradually. Fuel-heavy aircraft drop to lower altitudes where the air is thicker, engines breathe easier. But fighters, nearly empty, stay high. Momentum is their reserve now. Howard crosses the coast at 20,000 feet. The Merlin still runs smoothly. No coughing, no hesitation. The gauge shows near empty. He's flying on residual fuel now, whatever clings to the tank walls, whatever the fuel pump can suck from the lines. Below, the North Sea reflects the midday sun. Patches of whitecaps, fishing boats, air-sea rescue launches waiting for ditchings. Howard doesn't look at them. He keeps his eyes on the horizon. England is out there, invisible but certain. His wingman calls low fuel. Critical. Howard tells him to descend to 500 feet, prepare for ditching, aim for a rescue boat if possible. His wingman acknowledges. The Mustang peels off, drops away, gone. Howard flies on alone. The squadron scattered, some ahead, some behind, some in the water. The mission fragmented into individual struggles against fuel and distance. At 1400 hours, the English coast materializes. Pale cliffs, green fields, the most beautiful sight in aviation. Howard breathes out slowly. He's going to make it. He descends gradually, 10,000 feet. 5,000, the engine still runs, no warning lights, no roughness. The Merlin, efficient to the end, delivers him home. Boxted airfield appears ahead. Familiar runway. He enters the pattern, no time for regulation circuits, straight in. Gear down, flaps down, power back. The Mustang floats over the fence. Touches down smoothly, rolls out. He taxis clear, cuts the mixture. The engine dies instantly, fuel exhaustion. If he'd flown one more minute, he would have landed dead stick. Ground crew run to the aircraft. Howard sits in the cockpit, hands still on the controls. He's been flying for 5 hours and 20 minutes. His legs are numb, his back aches. His hands cramp, he flexes his fingers, unstraps, climbs out. The crew chief asks how it went. Howard says they made it to Berlin and back. The crew chief grins. He knows what that means. Across East Anglia, other Mustangs land. Some on fumes, some dead stick, some crash landing with battle damage and empty tanks. Pilots stumble from cockpits, legs shaking, faces creased from oxygen masks. But they're home. The bombers land later. Heavier, slower, damaged. Some don't make it. They ditch, crash, divert to emergency fields. Crews bail out over England when engines quit. But 423 bombers return, more than any previous Berlin mission. Losses are lower than predicted. Damage is manageable. The fighters stayed with them all the way. Mission planners stare at the return times. The first bombers landed at 1530 hours, 4 hours earlier than calculated. Fuel consumption better than expected. Winds more favorable than forecast. Crew's discipline held. Impossible, but verified. Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, March 4, 1944. Evening. General Henry Hap Arnold sits in his office, reviewing reports from 8th Air Force. The Berlin mission launched this morning European time. Results expected late afternoon East Coast time. Arnold commands the entire United States Army Air Forces, over 2 million personnel, 64,000 aircraft, operations in Europe, the Pacific, Alaska, North Africa, the Middle East. But today his attention is fixed on one mission, Berlin. The strategic implications are profound. If 8th Air Force can hit Berlin in daylight and survive, it proves the doctrine. Precision bombing works, fighter escort is viable, the Luftwaffe can be defeated, invasion of Europe becomes feasible. If the mission fails, the cost will be catastrophic, not just in aircraft and men, but in credibility. The British advocated night bombing for a reason. Daylight raids are suicide without escort. If the fighters can't reach the target, the bombers go alone. If the bombers go alone, they die. Arnold authorized the mission over objections. Some staff officers warned the Mustang's range figures were theoretical, untested at operational scale, too risky. Arnold overruled them. The mission proceeds. Now he waits. Teletype machines clatter in the communications center. Reports trickle in from England. Mission launched. Bomber stream forming, crossing enemy coast, penetrating toward target, fighters still escorting. That last line catches Arnold's attention. Fighters still escorting. Hours into the mission, deeper than any previous escort, the Mustangs are doing what the doctrine said they couldn't. Target bombed, formations turning home, fighters still with them. Arnold checks the time. The return flight will take hours. Fuel will be critical. He expects reports of ditchings, emergency landings, losses to fuel exhaustion. The fighters pushed beyond known limits. Some won't make it back. He waits. More reports. Formations crossing coast outbound, heading over North Sea, fighters accompanying, weather holding, visibility good. Then a report that makes Arnold stand up from his desk. First bombers landing, time 15:30 hours. He checks his watch, calculates backward. The bombers launched at 600, landed at 15:30, 9.5 hours, but mission estimates projected return after 1800, possibly 1900 hours. Fuel exhaustion forced slow cruise, long descent, delayed recovery. But they're landing now, 4 hours early. He requests confirmation. The teletype responds, confirmed, bombers landing, no fuel emergency, minimal ditchings, escort fighters returning. Arnold asks about fighter losses to fuel exhaustion. The response takes 10 minutes. Then, minimal. Majority of fighters return to base, fuel state adequate. He reads the line twice. Adequate fuel, after a 1,000-mile combat mission, after escorting to Berlin and back, after dogfights over the target. Adequate. He calls for the mission profile, reviews the numbers, fuel capacity, consumption rates, distance, time, the math checks, barely, but it checks. The Mustang did it. Arnold sits back down. He's led the Army Air Forces through expansion, doctrine development, political battles, budget fights, and operational crises. He's seen victories and disasters. He's sent men into combat knowing some wouldn't return. But this mission represents something larger. It proves the concept. Long-range fighter escort, daylight precision bombing, strategic air power, everything the Air Forces built toward, validated in one mission. He drafts a commendation for 8th Air Force, mentions the Berlin mission specifically, praises the aircrews, then he adds a personal note to Doolittle. Thank God they're already home. The phrase spreads through the Pentagon. Officers repeat it. It captures the emotion behind the numbers, relief, surprise, vindication, the mission everyone thought impossible, the aircraft everyone doubted, the range no one believed, all proven. In England, Doolittle receives Arnold's message. He reads it to his staff. They've been tracking returns all afternoon, watching the operations board fill with landed aircraft, green markers, safe, home, more than expected, better than hoped. Doolittle knows what this mission means. The Luftwaffe must now defend every target in Germany. No sanctuary, no safe airspace. Berlin is reachable, Munich, Vienna, anywhere. The escorts can go anywhere the bombers can. The war just changed. He orders mission planners to prepare follow-up raids. Berlin again. Deeper targets, push the advantage, don't let the Germans recover. But tonight he lets the crews rest. Intelligence officers debrief the returning pilots. Standard procedure. Times, locations, enemy contacts, fuel states, damage assessments. The reports are consistent. Fighters reached Berlin, engaged enemy aircraft, escorted bombers home, landed with reserve fuel. The last part surprises the intelligence officers. Reserve fuel after 5 hours. Pilots explain their fuel management, precise cruise settings, altitude discipline, minimal combat maneuvering unless necessary. They followed their training, trusted the numbers held. One intelligence officer notes that several pilots mentioned talking to themselves during the flight, calling out fuel checks, navigation points, engine settings, out loud. In the cockpit, he asks if this is standard procedure. The pilots say no, but it kept them sharp, focused, awake. 5 hours is a long time to stay mentally engaged. Talking helped. The officer writes it down. Possible training recommendation. Self-verbalization for long-duration missions. Ground crews examine the returned Mustangs. Minimal battle damage, no structural failures. Engines performed flawlessly. Fuel systems worked as designed. Drop tanks fed properly. Transfer pumps functioned. The aircraft did everything asked of it. Crew chiefs calculate fuel remaining in each aircraft. Average 30 minutes of flight time. Some more, some less. But none landed completely dry. The mission planners calculated correctly. The Mustang's reputation transforms overnight. Before Berlin, it was the promising newcomer. Fast, agile, unproven. After Berlin, it's the war winner, the fighter that changed everything. Orders flood in. Production ramps up. Every fighter group wants Mustangs. North American Aviation's factory in Inglewood, California, runs 3 shifts. The assembly line produces Mustangs faster than pilots can be trained to fly them. The aircraft becomes the backbone of the fighter escort force. Berlin itself is bombed again. March 6, March 8, March 9, each time Mustangs escort all the way. The Luftwaffe responds with everything available. Mass formations, rocket-equipped destroyers, ramming attacks, desperation tactics. The Mustangs keep coming. By late March, the Luftwaffe begins conserving its fighters. The losses are unsustainable. Every engagement over Berlin costs dozens of aircraft. Experienced pilots are killed. Replacements are inadequate. Fuel shortages limit training. Quality declines. The air superiority battle tips decisively toward the Allies. The March 4 mission cost 18 bombers, 60 heavy fighters lost, over 200 men, some killed, some captured, some missing. The numbers are stark, but they're lower than unescorted missions to lesser targets. Schweinfurt cost 60 bombers, Regensburg cost 36. Berlin, the most heavily defended target in Europe, cost 18. The fighters made the difference. But the mission also revealed costs not counted in aircraft or men. Pilot fatigue became a limiting factor. 5-hour missions left pilots physically and mentally exhausted. Reaction times slowed. Decision-making degraded. Some pilots fell asleep in the cockpit on the return flight, waking to find themselves off course or in dangerous attitudes. Flight surgeons began studying fatigue in long-duration fighter operations. They recommended oxygen flow checks, mandatory movement exercises in the cockpit, and rotation schedules limiting consecutive maximum range missions. Training programs adapted. New pilots received instruction in fuel management, navigation over featureless terrain, and sustained attention techniques. The self-verbalization method, noted by intelligence officers, became formal doctrine. Pilots were taught to talk through their actions, keeping their minds engaged during long flights. Aircraft modifications followed. Mustangs received improved seat cushions. Cockpit heating systems were upgraded. Fuel gauges were recalibrated for better accuracy. Engineers studied ways to extend range even further. The strategic bombing campaign intensified. With viable escort to any target, mission planners struck deeper into Germany. Synthetic oil plants, ball-bearing factories, aircraft production facilities, marshalling yards, the target list expanded weekly. German industry struggled to respond. Dispersal efforts moved production to underground facilities and remote locations. But dispersal reduced efficiency. Output declined. Quality suffered. The air campaign, validated by Berlin, achieved its strategic goals. The Luftwaffe never recovered air superiority. By June 1944, Allied aircraft dominated the skies over France. The Normandy invasion proceeded under an umbrella of air power. German ground forces, accustomed to Luftwaffe support, fought without it. The psychological impact was profound. James Howard received the Medal of Honor for actions over Berlin. Not the March 4 mission, but a subsequent raid where he single-handedly engaged a formation of German fighters attacking bombers. He fought alone for 30 minutes, his wingman and squadron separated by weather. He broke up the attack, shot down multiple aircraft, and escorted the bombers home. His fuel management, learned on the March 4 mission, allowed him to fight longer than doctrine suggested possible. He remained humble. He told reporters the medal belonged to all the pilots who flew long-range escort, the ones who made it home and the ones who didn't. He was just the one they chose to recognize. The 354th Fighter Group continued flying Mustangs throughout the war. They escorted bombers to every major target in Germany. They flew ground attack missions during the invasion. They supported the advance across France. They flew until the war ended. After the war, aviation historians studied the Berlin mission. They analyzed fuel consumption data, combat reports, and aircraft performance records. They confirmed what the pilots already knew. The Mustang could do what no other fighter could: fly farther, fight harder, bring crews home. But the aircraft was only part of the story. The pilots made it work. Their discipline, training, and professionalism turned theoretical range into operational reality. They trusted the numbers when instinct said it was impossible. They flew the fuel curves. They resisted the temptation to chase glory at the expense of the mission. They brought themselves and the bombers home. The phrase Hap Arnold spoke on March 4 echoed through air power doctrine for decades. Thank God they're already home. It captured the essence of escort duty. The mission isn't killing enemies, it's protecting friends. Success is measured in bombers that return, not fighters that score. That philosophy reshaped fighter tactics. Aggressiveness remained essential, but restraint became equally valued. Knowing when not to engage, when to stay in position, when to let an enemy escape because the bombers need you more. Modern fighter pilots still study the Berlin mission, not for tactics which have evolved beyond recognition, but for decision-making under constraint, for operational discipline, for the mathematics of fuel and distance and time, for the understanding that the mission is larger than any individual. The Mustang itself became legend. It served in over 50 air forces worldwide. It flew in combat into the 1980s. Civilian racers still fly restored Mustangs, setting speed records and winning competitions. The aircraft's silhouette is instantly recognizable: sleek, purposeful, beautiful. But on March 4, 1944, it was just a tool, an aluminum and steel machine that sipped fuel efficiently and flew farther than it should. The men who flew it turned capability into victory. They calculated the fuel, they flew the numbers, they trusted the math over their fear. They went to Berlin and came home. They proved the impossible was merely difficult. And when they landed, hours before expected, exhausted but alive, commanders thousands of miles away exhaled in relief and surprise. The mission no one believed could succeed had succeeded. The war had changed. Air power had matured. All because a fighter could fly a little farther than anyone thought possible, and pilots could endure a little longer than anyone expected. That's the story of the 1,000-mile mission, of fuel and fatigue and faith in engineering, of men who turned theory into practice, of a single sentence spoken in relief and awe. Thank God they're already home.